Hey class, this is Katrina Berg and this is your week 2 additional resource video. This week I'm going to be highlighting some things from your chapters that you'll be reading this week, including social, political, legal, and also related to market research. So to get started, let's look at a political example that could impact your business and to be aware of. Um, Venezuela. So if you are operating in a country such as Venezuela, there is a very good chance that your company may be taken over by the state, and there's little to no recourse available to you. Expropriation, confiscation, nationalization are all ways that your business could be taken over. So be aware of what the country's political climate is like, who's ruling it, is it business friendly? All of these things are considerations when you look into moving into a country or region for your business. Another example might be civil war. If you are operating in a country that has civil war breakout or is ongoing, that may impact your such things as your distribution routes. It also could impact your ability to even staff your location. Even if civil war isn't currently happening in the region that you've moved into or looking to move into, be aware of what's happening politically. Things may change down the road. And at that point, you have to make a choice of whether you stay or whether you go in your region. Tourism, let's talk about that industry. So one example is cruise ships. Cruise ships will go into a region, and this, I believe there's a case study in your books as well about this, but cruise ships coming in, you have that economic benefit of tourists coming into your country, and you also have the local concerns of the impacts that those tourists are bringing. Some are positive, some are negative. Some of the negative might be increased traffic, quality of life is diminished because tourists are staying out late at night, making noise. There is more traffic on the roads, of course, and there's also just the infrastructure impact, meaning that there are more cars on the road, there's more smog that's happening. So you as a business can be seen as impacting local quality of life. And if that matters to you, then you might want to send out some messages of what you're doing to mitigate that impact. Culture, let's dig deeper into that. So cultural values matter when you are in a region or when you're expanding. What you do here in the US, you may not be able to do the same overseas and abroad. One example of culture might be in China, 4 is considered an unlucky number. So you probably don't want to have any 4s in your product branding or messaging. Music, attitude, dietary preferences, superstitions all can impact how your product or service is perceived. You obviously want also with language and communication to ensure that how you're selling that product from brand, logo, messaging, on even social media matters. So what you think might be okay in local vernacular may not be okay, may have a totally different meaning. Another thing might be with vendor meetings. We as Americans tend to be very direct in our approach in our meeting. Let's go straight to negotiations, whereas other countries, other regions, Japan's a good example, they may want to spend more time getting to know you. They may prefer a longer negotiation process. And in order to gain that business and build that relationship, you will have to adopt your approach. Let's now move on to understanding the adoption process of a product. So you have a product that you're introducing. Understand that adoption process has 5 key points: awareness of the product, interest in the product, evaluation of the product, trial of the product, and adoption. So again, that time frame may be different in other countries than it would be in the US market. So understand how the consumer evaluates and makes their decision to purchase, and then what follow-up is required after that purchase. Finally, I wanted to talk about the laws of a country. We touched about politics, social, cultural. Legally, if you're in a country, obviously you need to adhere to that country's laws, rules, and regulations. Also be aware that the US has what they call a Foreign Corrupt Services Protection Act, which means that you, if you're operating in a foreign country, cannot bribe. It may be culturally acceptable to bribe in that country, but we as the US have a set of laws in place that say you can't do that as a business. So being aware of that and complying with that is important. You also have such things that you need to be aware of as intellectual property rights. What we have here in the US versus what might be in place in a foreign country is different. That intellectual property includes patents, trademarks, and copyrights. So again, be aware of what's going on in the country you're in, what US laws are in place, and what recourse you might have available to you. There's the International Court of Justice, but it is only as good as a country's compliance with that court. So if a country decides not to comply with the court's ruling, there is no recourse. Finally, information technology. Let's talk about the market research process and how that is important to what you're doing. Companies usually set up with IT, and then there's management information systems, also known as MIS. Both are used to retain information, evaluate information. You need to be able to secure your information, and you need to consider how much you're going to invest in keeping your information secure, how well you can run reports, and look at the data that you're getting from that country. Intranet, that's really important. Again, this goes back to security issues. Can your staff remotely log in? Is it safe for your staff to remotely log in, or is that country potentially hacking what you're looking at? Market information. How do you get market information in a foreign country? Mostly the best information that you get is feet on the ground. Walk the area, understand the culture, see sights, smells, sounds, see how consumers act. What do they choose? What do they pick? What are your competitors doing in that country and in that market? You also may find companies that are willing to help and provide you additional information. Some sources could be government information, supplier information, distribution information, Chamber of Commerce information. There are global chambers of commerce. And when you're looking at research, your book has a lot of information about the research process. Do take a look at that. To highlight your formal research stages. You have to think of things as new parameters when you're looking at a foreign country. Do you have to change anything? You're looking at culture shock, which might be overwhelming to you, of just too much information, too different. And that also leads into overload. If you're looking at 2 or 3 different countries and regions, is it too much? And you need to consider if you're going to broaden your scope and definition of what you're looking at in market research. You can do this in-house, or again, you could outsource. There are companies that help you with this information specifically. There is a chart on page 175 in your books that outlines this process in a little bit more detail. All right, class, thanks so much, and let me know if you have questions.